I knew something was wrong when my son asked me if grown-ups were supposed to hurt each other with words. And the worst part? He learned that from his own grandparents, while my husband just stood there. That's the moment I realized I wasn't the problem, the family was. Thursday nights are never my favorite, but they're the nights when Ryan's family seems to think they have every right to show up and examine my life. They live on the west edge of the city, a 25-minute drive away, yet they always arrive on time as if it's an obligation I must comply with. Today I didn't have the strength to resist, the sudden cold snap, traffic backed up because of an accident, my boss asking me to stay an extra hour to finish the quarterly report. When I arrived at school, my son's teacher told me he got into an argument and threw his pencil case on the floor. My daughter forgot her jacket, and we had to go back to the lost and found. I came home with my arms full of bags, my head full of unread messages, and the kitchen empty because I hadn't gone grocery shopping. I made quick roasted chicken with mashed potatoes, simple but clean, enough for an exhausting night. But the moment I opened the oven, I heard their car stop in front of the house. No knocking. They used the spare key, the one I gave them, for emergencies. Harold walked in first, taking off his coat and tossing it onto a chair like this was his home. Linda was gentler, but her eyes swept across the kitchen table as if grading me. Ryan followed behind them, not asking if I was okay, but instead, "Did you finish in time?" Dad doesn't like waiting. I froze for a few seconds because I knew he definitely hadn't told them I worked late. That would make him lose points. Harold sat at the table, stared straight at the chicken, and asked calmly, "How long did you cook this?" If he had said it gently, maybe it wouldn't have stung. But he used the tone of someone inspecting a mistake. 25 minutes, I said. Harold smiled, not kindly. Right, it looks rushed. Linda parted her lips as if to soften the blow, but she only exhaled quietly and stayed silent. Ryan twirled his fork, waiting for a chance to prove something. Then he said to his father, "I told her, but you know, Emily likes things fast." The air at the table dropped a degree. No one defended me. No one asked how my day was. I just looked down at the mashed potatoes and thought, I'm being criticized for trying too hard. My daughter's tiny legs swung under the chair, stopping each time someone's voice rose. She held onto my shirt, trying not to draw attention. My son stared at Ryan, clearly understanding I was being blamed for nothing. Harold continued as if reading a list of my failures, "The house is a bit messy. A woman who keeps a house like this won't keep a family for long." I inhaled sharply. The house wasn't messy. I just hadn't put away the kids' school coats and a bag of toys. But Ryan added, "I keep telling her, but she doesn't listen." I asked, "Listen to what?" Ryan shrugged. "You know." No, I didn't. And he never told me whatever that repeated, "you know," was supposed to be. Harold picked up a piece of chicken, chewed slowly, and said, "If you serve something like this to my staff, they'd quit tomorrow." My throat warmed with rising anger, but I couldn't react. The kids were there. Linda noticed my eyes reddening, and she placed her hand on mine as if saying, "Hang in there," but she pulled back when Harold glanced at her. I could see she was also a victim, just in a different role. I tried to regain a little control. "I can make something else next week." Harold chuckled, "Whether we come next week, depends." I understood. That wasn't a threat. It was a reminder of his power. Ryan looked at him, then at me, waiting to see how I'd respond. He wanted me silent. I knew that. During dinner, no one spoke to me. They spoke about me. How I should manage my time. Better, how I didn't prioritize family, how I let the kids speak too free. I sat right there, yet they talked as if I didn't exist. My son looked at me like he wanted to ask, "Are you okay?" but didn't dare. When the meal ended, Harold stood, wiped his mouth, and said one final sentence, "To be honest, my son deserves someone who takes better care of the family." Ryan didn't correct him. He even nodded slightly. When the door closed behind them, I stood still in the kitchen, my hand resting on the cold counter. Ryan asked, "Are you mad again?" Not, "Are you tired?" Not, "I'm sorry Dad spoke like that." Just mad again. I looked at him, but I no longer saw the man I married years ago. I saw a man who needed his father's approval more than he respected his wife. That night, I didn't go to the bedroom. I sat in the laundry room, under the dim yellow light, listening to the dryer hum. I needed silence. I needed a place where no one judged me for simply surviving the day. And for the first time, I asked myself, if I disappeared for a few days, would any of them notice? Or would their lives be easier without me? The next morning, the house was so quiet I could hear the heater clicking on and off. Ryan woke up earlier than usual. I knew because I heard cabinet doors slamming and him muttering under his breath. When I came downstairs, he was already sitting at the table with his laptop open, though he clearly wasn't working. He avoided looking at me the way someone avoids facing a mistake. What Dad said last night was because he cares about us, he said. Not an apology. Not a question about how I felt. Just an excuse. I stood by the sink, poured water, and kept my voice steady. Cares about who? You or your family? Ryan didn't look up. You make everything heavy, he said, as if I had created last night's scene. I wanted to ask why he had been siding with his father so much lately. But he wouldn't answer. I knew because he had hidden many things, starting with the email I found last month from his company titled Termination of Contract. He never mentioned it. He still put on a shirt every morning, drove off to work, and came home saying it had been a long day. I stayed quiet, not wanting to expose him in front of the kids eating cereal at the table. My daughter looked between us like she was trying to guess whether the adults would fight. I smiled to reassure her, but Ryan suddenly said, if you just tried a little harder, everything would be easier. My hand trembled slightly. Not from anger. From realizing he actually believed that. In the afternoon, Linda called me. Not to apologize for last night, but to help me understand Harold's intentions. Her voice was soft, a little shaky, like someone used to speaking carefully. He only wants the best for the family, she said. I replied, I don't understand how humiliating someone is the start of something good. Linda went quiet for a few seconds, then sighed, he is who he is. Don't take it to heart. I tightened my grip on the phone. People who say, don't take it to heart, are usually the ones who never had to endure it for long. I asked her, do you think last night was normal? She didn't answer directly. She said, he said those things because of his son. I froze. Right. Ryan. It's always Ryan. No one cares how much I endure to keep the peace. When I picked up the kids from school, the teacher said my son had pushed another child on the playground. That wasn't like him. He only acts that way when his emotions are overwhelmed. He said things are tense at home, she added. My throat tightened. Last night didn't just hurt me. It spread to my child in ways I couldn't control. On the drive home, my son asked, does Grandpa not like you? I almost hit the brakes. I answered as gently as possible, no, he's just a difficult person sometimes. He looked out the window with a sadness so deep it made me want to turn the car around and confront Harold. You didn't do anything wrong, he whispered. I didn't know what to say. When we got home, Ryan wasn't there. No note, no message. I walked into the living room and saw the crumpled napkin Harold left on the table last night. That tiny object felt like a reminder, this house isn't yours. I gathered the dishes, cleaned the table, and opened the window to let cold air in to clear out the suffocating atmosphere. My phone buzzed. A message from Ryan, my parents want to come over again tonight. Make something decent. I read it 3 times. No, are you okay? No, let's talk. Just, make something decent. Like I was their cook. In that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for months, Ryan wasn't an outsider in this. He was part of it. He fed it. He used it as a shield for his own failures. And he needed me to play the inadequate wife, so his father would keep believing Ryan was the perfect man they raised. And me? I was just the backdrop for comparison. That evening, while the kids were in the bath and Ryan still hadn't come home, I sat alone in the kitchen, in front of the oven still warm from yesterday's meal, and asked myself a question I had avoided for too long. Am I teaching my children that staying silent in the face of disrespect is normal? And if I keep enduring this, will they grow up to become another Harold, or another version of me? Ryan came home close to 8 that night, the smell of beer still clinging to his jacket. He didn't greet anyone. He just walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge like my entire day didn't exist. I was still folding the kids' clothes. When he shut the fridge and saw me looking, he said immediately, "Don't start." No apology. No explanation. Just a warning. I straightened up, still holding our son's little hoodie. "I haven't said anything." Ryan leaned against the sink, arms crossed. "I know your kind of silence." I wanted to ask, which kind? The kind where I get yelled at all night and still have to smile so the kids won't cry? But I swallowed it. I set the laundry basket down. "Ryan, last night you let your dad say things about me that weren't true. And you added to it." Ryan sighed, the kind of sigh meant to show how exhausting it was to listen to me. "You're too sensitive," he said. He's talked like that for decades. Everyone's used to it. I looked straight at him. "But I haven't spent decades in your family." He shrugged, indifferent. "You should learn to let things go." I laughed softly, not out of joy, but because that sentence sounded more like Harold than Ryan. "Let it go?" I asked. "Your son shoved another kid today because of the tension last night. You think the kids are used to it too?" Ryan stiffened. "Don't use the kids to make this bigger." And that was when I realized he didn't care whether the damage spread to the children. He only cared that I was inconvenient. I grabbed the trash bag, tied it up, and set it down harder than usual. Not out of anger, out of restraint. "Ryan, your parents can't take the keys to our house and walk in whenever they want." He turned sharply. "They're family. You planning to ban them?" I wanted to say yes, but I knew that would only fuel him. "I just want them to knock," I said. Ryan let out a short, humorless laugh. "You always need to control everything." I stayed quiet. He was building a version of me so he wouldn't have to look at the version of himself, the man who lost his job but was too prideful to admit it, so he let his father tear me down instead. Linda texted me then, "Your father-in-law wants to come tonight to clear things up." I handed the phone to Ryan. He read it, gave it back, and said something that made me want to walk out, "Then get ready." I said, "Why me? This is your issue." He stayed silent, the silence of someone who knew he was wrong but chose the side that was easiest. I added, "If they come here tonight just to scold me again, I won't sit and listen." Ryan shrugged as if none of it involved him. "Do what you want." At exactly 7, Harold's car pulled up. He didn't come alone. He brought a large box, the kind used for carrying food or personal belongings. When they stepped inside, he set it on the table with a message that didn't need words, "I'm here to fix you." Harold didn't sit. He stood, hands gripping the back of the chair across from me. "We need to sort a few things," he began. Ryan stood beside him like furniture. Linda took a seat but kept her eyes down. Harold said, "Last night you showed attitude." I didn't remember showing attitude. I remembered trying desperately to avoid an explosion. I asked, "What do you mean?" Harold looked at me like a child. "You stayed silent in a defiant way. No one in this house is allowed to do that." I let out a small laugh. "This house?" I asked. "This is the house Ryan and I rent with our money." "You're talking like I'm some guest." Harold's voice grew harder. "If not for my son, what money would you be renting with?" Linda whispered, "Harold," but he waved her off. Ryan said nothing. I turned to look at him, not for rescue, but to measure how much of him was still my husband. He didn't meet my eyes, he stared at the floor. Harold continued, "If you can't handle the household, we'll take the kids to our place for a while." I blinked. "Take who?" Harold clarified each word, the kids. The room froze for a moment. Ryan still said nothing. I asked, what right do you have? Harold replied, a grandfather's right. The right to protect my family. Linda's hands tightened on her skirt. She knew he was crossing a line but couldn't stop him. I was calmer than I expected. If you think I can't care for my own children, then let me show you something. I pulled up the school report on my phone and handed it to Harold. My son got into a fight today because of the pressure from last night. I'm not blaming anyone, but I won't let this continue. Harold glanced at it once. Kid stuff, he said. I replied, maybe you think that because you're not the mother. Harold straightened. You're being disrespectful. I didn't step back. I'm being honest. Ryan finally spoke. Emily, don't escalate. I turned to him, my voice steady enough to surprise myself. If you have any responsibility left as a father, say the right thing. Ryan went quiet again, an awful silence, the kind that made me unsure whether he was cowardly or simply afraid. I walked over, grabbed the kids' jackets, and hung them by the door. If you came here tonight to teach me obedience, I'm sorry. Wrong house. Harold asked, what are you doing? I said, taking the kids out. This place isn't safe for them tonight. Linda sprang up. No. Emily, please don't. I looked at her. I'm just taking them to dinner. So they can see that adults can be calm without hurting each other. Harold's face turned red. If you walk out with them, this won't end well. I took the keys. It didn't end well last night. Later, at a small diner on the corner, my daughter asked, Mom, are you getting in trouble? I smiled and touched her hair. No. I'm doing the right thing. But inside, I knew, tonight was the first time I pushed back against their entire family. And the first time I realized none of them were really on my side, except me. When I brought the kids home after dinner, the house felt darker than usual. No TV, no footsteps, just the kitchen light casting a long line across the hallway. I told the kids to brush their teeth and get to bed early, then headed to the kitchen because I knew Ryan would be there. He sat at the table, rolling an unopened beer can between his hands, staring at the surface as if rehearsing the role of a victim. When I pulled out the chair and sat down, he didn't. Look at me. You made Dad furious, he said. I set my keys on the table. I know. Ryan shook his head. You went too far. Walking out in the middle of the conversation? What do you expect my family to think? I said, I didn't walk out. I removed the kids from an unsafe environment. Ryan let out a laugh with no humor in it. Unsafe? You talk like they're abusive. I looked directly at him. Your son was emotionally shaken. If that's not a hurt to you, then you're living in another dimension. Ryan fell silent for a few seconds, then switched tactics. You embarrassed my family. I asked simply, and you? You're not embarrassed about how you let them talk to me? For the first time that night, he lifted his head. I don't want to go against Dad, he said quietly. He's going through things. I narrowed my eyes. And his coping mechanism is humiliating your wife in front of your kids? Ryan didn't like the sound of that. He got up, paced a few steps as if searching for a counterargument, then said, Emily, you don't understand. I need him right now. That sentence sliced clean, he needed his father, not me. I asked, need him for what? What's happening with your job, Ryan? He froze, his shoulders tensing. My job is fine, he said, but his eyes shifted to the right, the clearest sign he was lying. I slowly stood up. I don't know how long you plan to hide it. But I've known since last month. He spun around. Who told you? I replied, your HR email. You forgot to log out. Ryan had no comeback. The room went silent like someone muted it. I continued, you didn't need to feel ashamed with me. But you were so ashamed you let your father insult me on your behalf. That's what I can't accept. Ryan slammed his hand on the table, not hard, but enough to show how cornered he felt. I lost my job, so what? You think that's easy? I asked, and that gives you the right to dump all your frustration on me? He didn't answer. He sank back into the chair like the air had left him. I don't know what to do, he murmured, as if asking for pity. Dad always saw me as strong. I don't want to disappoint him. I leaned against the table. Who exactly are you disappointing, Ryan? Me? The kids? Or yourself, and you just won't say it? Ryan blinked, and for the first time he didn't look like he was pretending. But I didn't soften. Not tonight. I said plainly, I don't need you to fight your dad. I need you to fight what's wrong. Ryan stared at me for a long moment before saying something true but still painful. I don't know if I can do that. His words were a mirror. I was living with a man who always chose the safest position, and that position wasn't next to me. I exhaled, quietly but tired. Then I'll have to do it. The next morning, I called Linda. Her voice was tense, like she was waiting for me to explode. But I simply said, I'd like to speak with you and Harold this afternoon. Not to argue. To clarify things. Linda exhaled with relief and said almost immediately, thank you for still wanting to talk. She wasn't fully on my side, but she was the only one in that family who could still listen. At 3 in the afternoon, I arrived at their house, a small, tidy place, always a bit chilly from the open windows. Harold was watching the news but turned the TV off when he saw me. Linda brought tea, placing the tray down carefully in the thick silence. I didn't dance around it. I'm here to say something important, I said. Not about last night. About the kids' future. Harold raised an eyebrow. Finally. I continued, I'm not here to argue. I just need you to understand one thing, I'm not keeping you from your grandchildren. I'm not trying to separate the family. But I won't let the kids grow up thinking belittling and disrespect are what love looks like. Linda set her cup down, her hand slightly trembling. Harold didn't speak. I went on, you have every right to be their grandfather. But I have every right to be their mother. And I will protect them from words that make them believe their mother isn't good enough. Harold frowned. You're talking about me? I said, I'm talking about behavior, not a person. Linda nodded faintly, agreeing without saying it. Harold stood and walked a few steps, hands behind his back. I don't like the way you talk to me, he said. I held my ground. And I don't like the way you talk to me. But I'm here to fix things, not walk away. He looked at me for a long time, and for the first time, I saw something shift, not defeat, but understanding that I was no longer someone who would stay quiet. Linda came over and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Thank you, she said softly. No one has ever said it to him clearly. Harold returned to his seat slowly. He didn't apologize. But he said, I'll be more mindful. In his family, that sentence was a breakthrough. When I came home, Ryan was sitting on the sofa. What were you doing at my parents' house? He asked. I hung up my coat and replied, I handled my part. The rest is up to you. He looked at me as if he didn't understand, but I knew he did. I hadn't forgiven him, and I hadn't decided what would happen next. But that night, when I tucked the kids in and pulled the blankets up, I felt something clearer than everything else. I had stood up. Not loudly, not chaotically, just with a calm they couldn't break. And even though the story wasn't over, I finally understood one thing. This time, they were the ones who had to change, not me.